take notes, understand the concepts, understand what companies value, and make yourself somebody who can get accepted for the job, who can deliver on it, who can make the promises, and you'll see your career just skyrocket.
Hi, everybody. This is Arlo Gilbert, co-founder and CEO of Osano, a leading data privacy management platform. And you are listening to the Privacy Insider podcast. This show explores the past, present, and future of data privacy for privacy and business leaders alike, as well as anyone who wants to keep privacy top of mind. Hello, my name is Arlo Gilbert. I'm the founder of Osano. But today, I'm your host on the Privacy Insider. Today, we are joined by Nir Rothenberg, the Chief Information Security Officer at Rapyd, a fast-growing payments provider out of Israel. Prior to his time at Rapyd, Nir was the head of security at NSO Group, most famous for Pegasus and many of the nation-state hacking that we read about online, where he personally helped to bring down El Chapo. In addition to all of his time in security, Nir is an active advisor and investor in early-stage startups, a big fan of the Israeli startup community. Nir, welcome to the show.
I'm glad to be here. And before we start, I got an important question. Are we allowed to cuss?
Oh, yeah, we can cuss as much as you want. Well, Nir, so, you're known right now as the CISO at Rapyd. And I would love to hear a little bit about what Rapyd does for anybody in the audience who's not familiar with your company.
Yeah, thanks. So first off, when you say I'm known, this is a privacy podcast, as people who aren't celebrities, when you tell somebody, oh, you're known, you're like, by who? Or maybe it's just me. So yeah, I am the CISO at Rapyd. Rapyd's a payments company. Actually, today we just got the news that we were approved to get a license in another country. So we're a global payments company. Think of Stripe, Checkout.com, ADN. Yeah, that's where we operate. We're known for doing a lot of M&As and ultra scale. We grew since my time from a small company with 50 people to thousands of people globally. So, I've been a part of that journey as well.
Wow. And you joined pretty early on in Rapyd's career, right? I mean, you weren't employee 600.
No, I was like employee 50 or 70 or something like that.
Wow. And running security at a payments startup, I would imagine, can be a little daunting because you control money. So there's a lot of people out there that would love to go hack you.
Yeah, I think if you're daunted, then, security isn't for you. You know what I mean? First off, you have to be optimistic to the point of being naive, I think. You have to be like, I got this. I can do this. You know what I mean? If that's not your mentality, if it's like, oh my God, the world's so bad, you're just not going to make it. You're going to be burned out. You know what I mean? There's all kinds of statistics about CISOs that they're burned out, like they're victims of the profession. Like, oh my God, they have to sit in front of a laptop and get paid. Poor people, you know what I mean? Like they're victims. They can only last 18 months in their cushy job. And I'm like, yeah, it's not easy maybe, or maybe it's just really, really fun and fulfilling because you're at the forefront, you're at the bleeding edge of what's going on. You know what I mean? And you're something that really interests us. And I always tell my team, I tell them like, it's good that cyber is in the news and it's good that there's hacks, as long as they don't get us. If they get us, that's bad, right? Because I'll probably get fired like the coach of the team. But as long as they don't get us, it's good that there's cyber out there because that's what lets us get paid and do cool stuff and keep protecting and keeping Rapyd and its user secure. So it's a good thing to have that. So I'm sorry, I'm just giving you this whole rant about daunting. Let's see what the next word you say, and I'll talk for another 10 minutes.
Well, no, I mean, I think this is really interesting because the intersection of privacy and security is pretty important. And I mean, the reason that we're having you on this podcast is because you actually have had a fair amount of experience with data privacy in your various roles. As the CISO, I assume, and it sounds like privacy is part of your daily job.
Yeah. So being early on and building the discipline, the privilege is there. And this is, again, something I like to tell my team. I sound like some grandpa. Like I always tell them, but I like to tell my team, we're privileged to make the mistakes that in like 10 years, somebody's like, who the hell did this? Who's the idiot? So we get to be those idiots who make the first mistakes. So a lot of things we did when we built the program early, it was just like me and the general counsel was like, we should figure out this privacy thing. Like we're going into Brazil. You heard there's like the CCNA thing, you know what I mean? And then you got to figure it out. The only way to do that is to be curious and to be lucky enough to find people to collaborate with. Also internally, for instance, me and the general counsel of Rapyd have a great relationship from the beginning. We know how to empower each other, and then the other various stakeholders in Rapyd. But it goes also to getting the right partners, the right companies to work with, the right consultants to work with, that can help you understand all the various issues of any compliance, but especially privacy, which is one of the more dynamic compliances of recent years. If you look at it, Rapyd has a lot of compliance restraints, again, being in payments, being global, and privacy is definitely one that gets the most attention from partners, from customers, from regulators. It's always starting with privacy, and it just shows, how much work should be put in it.
And you mentioned that you guys just got a very exciting certification that's going to allow you to process payments in a more global manner. But it sounds like, you're keenly aware that going into a more global anything probably means more laws to comply with. Are you guys prepared for that? Are you worried about that at all?
Yeah, we tried to build a program like that, honestly. I remember when we just started the privacy program and we started putting all the pieces in play. And I tried this goes back to my early days as a consultant myself. One of the good things about consulting, it teaches you frameworks, the ways to think about anything, because you have to go to any organization and give value. So if you look at a risk management framework, it's always like what you're up against and then decide what to do about it. So that's how I always break things down. So let's say the privacy program with the general counsel, the first thing is like, okay, what are we up against? What's our requirements? What territories are we active in? What do they say there? Where are we strong? Do a total gap analysis, really, but very focused on what we're up against, and try to avoid hypotheticals and all kinds of theoreticals and stuff that you're not up against. Okay, there's enough to be up against without. And I think a lot of people make this big mistake, and they go like, yeah, but what if theoretically the aliens come and they have a new regulation? The zombies fight them. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, which Comic-Con am I stuck in right now? You know what I mean? So focus is your ally. So once we had that, we could go to consultants and start finding it. And, like every high-tech company, there's like this whole industry of privacy consultants today. And then you have like, okay, it's great that you do Europe, but I got Asia and I got Latin America and I got other territories. And there's a lot of rules coming out. How do I make sure that you're the partner that could take me to those places as well? And you'll be surprised. We went to top law firms, top consultancies, and we didn't like their answers because they were very narrow-minded. For them, privacy was only GDPR. You know what I mean? I'm like, okay, maybe for us, that's the main regulator. But what will happen 2-3 years? We have to make sure we're ready. Again, it's not some big thing, but it's just a 2 millimeter shift that makes a difference between being future-proof and shuffling all the time and putting out fires.
And I've got to imagine that part of the fun of being so early at a company is that you really get to influence those things as opposed to inheriting a program that was established by somebody else. Is that the case for you at Rapyd?
Yeah, definitely. That's one of the things that really, still this day, that's the influence, I think, is something that I personally really enjoy. If we have more time, we'd break down my personality and why. But I really enjoy that. I really enjoy that, I can move the needle. I really enjoy that thing. Just like I say, the mistakes I make will haunt people in the future. People always think legacy is good. Like, oh, he invented the cell phone. No, legacy is a mistake you made that people are like, why is this road planned like that? That guy, the guy who planned that road we all hate, everybody in his own city, he's got a giant legacy. Like every morning you're stuck in traffic, like, who is the idiot who did that? And there's a guy, he did that. And he has a legacy and he affects your life a lot. So no, but all seriousness, yeah, the impact till this day. And I tell my team, you should feel the impact because, if you're in security and privacy and it's so dynamic, especially in a company that's growing, that's scaling, that's going to new territories, you can really change and influence the way things are done. And yeah, I think that's important. And also that your place in the table is very important because you enable these things to happen. A lot of times they talk about privacy, security as a guardrails, right? You enable somebody to drive fast down the road. It's good to feel that. I still feel that. That's one of the things I love most about Rapyd, and they get into negotiation, like no pay raise, but here's some more influence for you.
That's right. We make up for our lack of cash as a startup by giving you more responsibility.
No, they pay other people. They got cash. They pay other people. But I come home and like, hey, honey, I didn't get that raise, but I got another project. She's like, so what, you more work for, just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Well, I think that one of the things that, we had a chance to talk before this show, and one of the things that aside from being incredibly funny, one of the things that I really loved about talking to you is that you have a really non-traditional story on how you ended up in this role as a CISO and somebody who's owning both privacy and security at a complicated high-tech company. And what we've heard from many of our listeners is that privacy and to some degree, I'm imagining security can be a little bit lonely because you often have to be the no factory, right? You have to say, I know that sounds fun, but you're going to get us sent to jail if you do that. And I'm really curious, as our audience surely is, how did you get to this place? What brought you into regulations and security? How did you even get here? Did you wake up one day as a small child and say, security and privacy, that's where I would like to focus my efforts? Or did you come upon it accidentally? I'm curious how you got there.
So when I was in the university, or in high school rather, we went to a tour of a science facility, and I got bitten by a radioactive CISO. And I went home and I lost my glasses. I got this killer bod. I got a dad bod and became a CISO right away. So yeah, that's what happened. Don't tell anybody about my origin story. The movie's coming out. It's going to be a big one. So yeah, I think nobody, I got little kids now, and no little kid ever thinks like, oh, I want to be the guy who's in charge of cyber risk or privacy risk. You don't think, because most people, they take it for granted. They're like, why would anybody hack me though? Because I didn't do anything wrong. Why would anybody abuse my personal information? It's not their business. Like people are decent. I wouldn't do that. Like if I would see, your cell phone open, I would hand it to you. I'm like, hey, excuse me, sir, your cell phone's open or whatever, So why would anybody do that to me? It's a naive outlook that most people have. And that's how you start out. That's why these things keep happening. Because organizations are naive and end users are naive. And, that's why scammers have an easy time. You know what I mean? So nobody thinks about it early on. I think a lot of people either get to it, they get to it by mistake. I think almost everybody that I've ever met in cyber got to it, through some coincidence. For me, it was really a coincidence. Like I thought I was going to be a scientist. I studied chemistry. I was like the worst chemist ever. I was no Walter White. I was really, really bad. I couldn't even be Jesse Pinkman. You know what I mean? I couldn't do that. I can't say the bitch. Good. So, but I watched that show. I'm like, why are they so good? So then I had to get a real job, and I got into risk management because it sounded exciting. Because, risk. What's more exciting? What's more exciting than a risk? I'm like, wait a second. I get to deal with risks. What am I, skydiving? Am I an actual superhero? That's like the naive outlook that I think you need to do to have to be successful. You know what I mean? I think just like we talked about burnout, people are like, oh my God, I'm so lonely here. And no, it's like the job isn't the problem. You're not collaborating. Empower yourself and try to collaborate more. It sounds really stupid to say that. That's like every podcast you ever listen to. It's like, if you believe and achieve and then conceive it, they always like telling you, like, what do you want from me? But the truth is, it is like that. It's up to you. Are you lonely? Get some friends. Collaborate, figure out how to have value. Are you working at a company that looks down on privacy and thinks about it, they just want to cover their ass and just, check the box, and you hate it because you're passionate about it? Move companies. There's enough companies that they need this, that they're scaling, and you're the person who's going to make all the difference. And it's up to you. It's not always easy. We've all had jobs we've hated. I remember my first job, by the way, in risk management, I couldn't stand it. I was like, for 6 months, I'm done. Like, it's time to level up. And then it took me 3 more years to find a job. You know what I mean? I just couldn't find anything. Every job that accepted me was worse than my current job. I'm like, oh my God, this is so much worse. So, sometimes it's hard, but fortunately in privacy and in security, it seems that right now, before AI takes over, the market is still in our favor as professionals. If we learn how to show value, we can get jobs. So there are organizations where you won't be lonely. And for me, it was all about the connection all the time. And I just happened to, start in risk management, get into IT risk. I remember I was doing an IT risk assessment. We used to call it IT assurance. And my boss, we were in Bank of Israel. He's like, oh, you're not doing IT risk assessments. You're doing cyber assessments. I'm like, what, cyborg? are we making up words? Like I'm doing a cyborg assessment. Like I was like, imagine like cyborgs. I'm like, but this is like the central bank of Israel. Like, why would they have a cyborg? And he's like, no, cyber, it's a new thing. And I just couldn't get it. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm too dumb. You're always very naive in the beginning. You're like, oh, I guess I'm too dumb to get what cyber means. It seems like we're doing the exact same thing. But suddenly my salary started to go up and the market started getting hot. And, I remember that they started, the jobs started coming in better and more organizations, like I was doing consulting, more organizations were needing us more than ever. And suddenly I'm something called a VCSO, you know what I mean? And I'm working in companies that would never even give me the time of day if I applied. Suddenly I'm there managing their cyber risks and understanding and implementing tools and really learning everything from the process. Just that's a beautiful thing about risk assessments in any field. You always start with the process. Then you think about the complexity. And then you think about, the probability for the risk to happen. And then you really look at every process from the ground up and you have a very kind of grounded way of looking at reality. And then it translates really well to almost anything you do. If you can get the technology, which again, I came from chemistry. I wasn't like in this kind of, Israeli army, military grade units, which is great, by the way, because today I invest in startups. I work with a lot of Israeli startups and they all think I'm one of them. Like from the unit, like, oh, where were you? Did you know that him? And I was like, no, I wasn't from there. And I'm a chemist. They was like, what are you doing here? I'm like, sorry, should I let myself out? So it's kind of funny.
That is
Yeah.
fantastic. And so one of the things that I thought was really fascinating about your background is that, although you started in risk, you then transitioned over to a very different kind of company when you joined NSO Group.
Yeah.
And for those who are listening and don't know, maybe you can tell us a little bit about NSO Group because they're big, but not everybody knows the name.
Yeah. Coming on a privacy podcast, talk about it, working at NSO, it is like coming on a, church podcast and talking about working for the Antichrist. It's like literally like that. Like NSO, people don't know, NSO Group is an Israeli cyber espionage company that sells cyber weapons to governments. If you Google them, you can read they're associated with some very interesting stories. Some of them are more true than others. For instance, according to the press, NSO's tools were used to capture El Chapo, the famous drug dealer. If you're listening to this, it had nothing to do with that. El Chapo, peace to you. I think his name is Guzman. He's one of the most notorious Mexican drug dealers. So they basically did a cyber espionage project on him and his surroundings. They were able to locate him twice, and now he's in jail in the U.S. for serious drug charges. And there's a lot of other stories and a lot of other scandals. So it's one of the most notorious companies when you talk about like government spying on citizens, and they have very amazing technologies. Just recently, like Meta sued them for hacking WhatsApp. You don't know too many companies that can hack WhatsApp. And again, just like with any kind of Fugazi, boogeyman kind of companies, a lot of it is true and a lot of it is like totally false and just they have no idea. And everything that kind of smells like some espionage is like, oh, it's NSO, the big bad NSO. I can't say they didn't enjoy that as well. As a company, when your name is so big that you can, hack anything, do anything, the customers come to you. You know what I mean? Especially if you're in an espionage business and your customers are limited, because there's regulations and they hardly sell to anybody. There's not a lot of customers. So it was good. So, I had the opportunity to work there. Again, totally naive. I was doing VCSO roles for a bunch of Israeli companies. One of them happened to be in cyber intelligence. And NSO was looking for their head of security, who was somebody who worked with cyber intelligence companies. And somehow they got to me. I didn't know what it meant.
Did they hack your phone to get to you? Did you wake up one morning with a message on your phone that says, hello, Nir?
No, nobody hacked my phone. I'm not interested. I always tell people, I get a lot, especially after I left, you get these businessmen like, oh, you got to tell me somebody hacked my phone. I'm like, why would anybody hack your phone? Like, what was so special? That you have to understand. To buy and use NSO costs millions. To infect somebody, just to infect one person, it costs hundreds of thousands, not millions, because you got to buy the whole system and the analyst and set it up. Nobody does that to be like, I wonder what the candidate is thinking about me. It's that it doesn't work like that. You know what I mean? It's like buying a tank to do a hit job, for a hitman. It doesn't work like that. Governments have tanks, they have weapons, they have things much worse than NSO. They have planes and rockets. And ultimately then they send a policeman with a taser. That's enough for me. You know what I mean? One guy with a taser, he'll get me. So they don't need to hack me if they didn't. Again, in a corporate setting, as an executive of Rapyd, there is a risk. See, that's already worth the trouble of even a nation state to get technology, or for a criminal organization to get fintech, to get fintech backend or stuff like that, or to get a massive breach of user information. That's always great news for a criminal organization. But as an individual, we're not that interesting. That's just the fact of it. And I had like crazy people come to me like, this is a true story. Every time I go on Spotify, the songs are telling me something. Like, and I think it's my father-in-law tried to get me to divorce my husband. Like, I had like a woman like explain this to me, and like, it's like you're telling me the big tech knew which pasta you're going to buy in the supermarket, and put it's mathematically almost impossible for that to happen.
So
Nobody's
the
gonna spend
average Jill or the average Joe does not really have to worry about an NSO group because it's just not worth the money.
Yeah, when Apple's like, oh, we exposed a nation state 0 day, patch your iPhones today. It's like, you can patch tomorrow. Like, you should, like, I'm a security guy. Patch your stuff, update your software. That's the best thing you can always do. Anybody here could be a CISO. Anybody listening, you want to be a CISO, go to a job interview, say, yeah, I'll be a CISO. The first thing I'll do, I'll update everything all the time. You'll be better than like 75-80% of companies in the world. If you can manage to do that. It's harder to do than it sounds. There's always conflicts and problems, but we have this thing will crash if we reset the server. But if you can do that, just use the updates that the companies come out. But for an individual, if you have an iPhone and there's like some 0 day that NSO found with, that NSO spotted, and they use it on like 3 guys who are Mexican drug dealers, and it's like very exclusive.
So at NSO Group, and I don't want to spend the whole time talking about NSO, but it's really interesting story. I mean, what was it like working there? So you came in because of that vCISO experience, and you landed on their radar. What was that like for you? I mean, that was a big change going from being a CISO that's engaging with financial institutions and shifting over to working for a nation state hacker.
Yeah, and let's just say level hacker. First off, I still miss the technical level, like working with NSO, and I still know some people from there, some in touch, some of the smartest people I've ever met. Like, they were so smart, they didn't see a need to move their hands when they walked. They were so smart that you thought you were in Westworld. That was big when I was there. So you'd be like, freeze motor functions. And then they looked at you, they're like, what are you doing, mortal? That was a good show. Anyway, like the smartest people, like people who can take an iPhone, take the source code, parse it, find a vulnerability, weaponize it, and sell it for hundreds of millions to nation states to stop criminals and drugs, usually, and drug dealers and terrorists and stuff like that. So it was smart people. It was also, from our perspective, and people told me, oh, this sounds like the Simpson episode where Homer works for the bad guy. And like, from our perspective, we were doing good. We got like on the regular, when you're working NSO, you got like Western nations, European nations, some of the best countries with the best human rights track record. And they would come to like, thanks to you, we got the guy before he killed thousands of people. He was about to explode in our subway or metro, and we stopped him. Thanks to you, we stopped a woman trafficking ring because we were able to pinpoint the exact people. That's all the stories you get,
Wow.
because that's most of the stories, because most nations we sell to are Western nations. Sometimes there is needs, again, because ultimately the terrorists, they don't live in Western. I mean, when they're deployed, they do, but when they're training, Al Qaeda isn't like it's not Al Qaeda Belgium, right? I mean, maybe they go to Belgium for an attack, but it's not like we should just go to Belgium. They're like in third world countries, and a lot of time with low track records of human rights. Those are the countries that are trying to fight them. They're the forefront a lot of times. So you want to empower them to stop it. Now, when you work in NSO, you understand that it's not like either put a Pegasus and hack a phone or don't. That's very naive. It's either put a Pegasus and hack a phone or capture everybody knows and torture them until they talk. That's usually how these countries operate. It's a government. Like we all have governments. I'm in Israel, you're in the US. There's horror stories about government activities in every single the government. They have the power, they have the ability, and they do whatever they want. And if it's with violence, it's with violence. And if it's something elegant, like just hacking a phone and seeing some information, they'll do that. You know what I mean? So I would argue that if we're not naive and you compare hacking a cell phone to torture and to the other methods that people extract information, or in the past, hacking the cell phone is the best thing you can do, especially when it's so expensive and so technological that it's very limited to dozens or hundreds of people in the entire world at a given time. So, and again, it doesn't mean it can't be abused. Any tool can be abused. I could take Gmail and send spam and scams and trick people. It doesn't mean Gmail is bad. Gmail is a tool that's meant to do something good, collaborate, reach out, connect. You can abuse any tool. So, that's how we came in. Now, is it 100% true? I wasn't aware of everything, but from what I know, that's most of the truth. And again, it's a very complex subject. I think we could talk to a long time, but it was interesting that even in NSO, we cared about privacy because we had privacy laws. So even in NSO, we had to be GDPR compliant because they have branches in Europe, and we had to be Israeli privacy law compliant, and we had to understand where we keep our PII and understand. Now, NSO doesn't keep the information of the systems of the clients because it's a nation state. US isn't like, hey, you know what? We're going to use your tools, but you can keep it in Tel Aviv in your servers.
Like, spin it up on our cloud.
Yeah.
And host it for us.
It doesn't work. Like, it's not like that. Like, the customers keep the intelligence and they use that in court and as part of their operations. And again, intelligence is a dirty business. James Bond isn't going to replace Mother Teresa anytime soon. Nobody's like, oh, you know who's a good guy? James Bond. He's a good guy. He's a stand-up guy, right? Like, shaken and not stirred. What a great boy. What a good boy. No, he's a killer. He's a, spy.
He's got a license to kill. I mean, that's exactly the whole theme of the show.
And he's a douchey guy who breaks girls' hearts. And he's like, nobody's like, oh, what a great friend James Bond is. He always remembers he doesn't remember your birthday. He's not a cool guy to hang out with. Everybody kind of hates him. Like, you talk about lonely, go be James Bond. So if NSO is the tool he's using to hack his way in, you know what I mean? That's a world it operates in. Now let's talk about alternatives. Let's not be naive. And that's, I think, is an important conversation to have that isn't had enough, because it's really easy to see, oh, look at this terrible thing that's about to happen, patch now, or the evil bad guys will get you. Again, I think once you develop this kind of ability to see shades of gray, then you can be a little more focused. I call it chasing zombies attacks. Like, AI is out. Oh no, that's the privacy apocalypse. Let's stop everything we're doing and just focus on this thing, which is totally theoretical right now. So these are the kind of things that when you work in a company that you get. But yeah, we did have privacy. We took it actually very seriously. I used to work with a very strong lawyer there who was the data privacy officer. We worked closely. And we did a beautiful project there for like GDPR readiness. It just came out it was about to come out when we were there. And
that is so wild to me. I mean, thinking through the juxtaposition of NSO, making sure they're GDPR compliant. I love one thing you said, about the alternatives, right? And I think that is a key thing that a lot of folks don't remember, is that, governments, by their very nature, the way a government remains in power and the way they enforce laws is through violence, right? It's, if you don't follow the law, we're going to come to your house and we're going to take you out of your bed and we're going to cuff you and we're going to take you to prison. Or we're going to take you to Guantanamo and we're going to waterboard you until you tell us what we need to know.
Or other stuff that you don't even know about because it's so secret. You know what I mean? That's how they operate. And by the way, in every place in the world, there's no government. It's like, you know what? When we have a serious criminal, we just got to let him chill, because violence is bad. It's like, yeah, we try not to. You see the riot police, you see it like in the most advanced countries, they have it, they use it. And there's misuse of every single tool, so that's just a reality. And it's really easy to close your eyes to that. It's just easy. Like, oh, it's just bad. It's just bad. And I think that's the complexity that we have. And sometimes I'm disappointed because even I'm talking to a guy like, yeah, I was an officer in 8200 and I did a lot of similar stuff, but NSO is pure evil because I read the news once. And I'm like, okay, maybe even the news was right. Do you have the entire context? Context is everything. By the way, in any assessment, context is everything. In privacy, I'll tell you like, oh, you have this database with private information. Now, is that good or bad? You have no idea. No, the same database. I can say, okay, here's a database of credit card numbers and addresses of people.
Yeah, if you're a fintech, of course, right? You need to have that information.
Yeah, that's one context. Okay, if you're authentic or not, where is it located? Do you have PCI? Do you have safeguards? You start adding context, and then you can make a conclusion. But if I'll be naive, I'll be like, oh, private data in a database, that's horrible. Yeah, but if I told you I'm talking about MasterCard, so it's like, yeah, of course they need that. How will they let me get paid? You know what I mean? So that's how the world works. The context is king, you know.
Context is king. I like that. That's a good phrase. And so when you were at NSO, I mean, it sounds like you mentioned like El Chapo and Guzman and some of these things. Are there any stories from NSO that really stand out to you? I know there was like Pegasus got stolen at some point in time. I mean, there was lots of drama
Yeah, yeah,
surrounding that
yeah,
business.
yeah. Yeah. So when I was there, unfortunately, but this is something that really helped me out later on. But when I was there, it sucked. So we had an employee, this is actually again in the news. You're invited to read about it, but we had an employee actually steal a Pegasus, some pretty senior employee in the automation department, and he tried to sell on the dark web where he got captured. And then he got discovered, fortunately, and he got arrested and he got tried and convicted. And again, the buyers were from hostile countries. So, not a good look for him. I remember the day he was interviewed. I remember seeing him. I still remember like me, like going to grab a coffee and seeing him and then asking his hiring manager, who was a buddy of mine, like, hey, who's this guy? He was very credentialed and he's a technical guy. Sometimes they're like more internalized. It's really hard to get it right. And again, what happened with Snowden, it happens, the most secure environments. At the end of the day, people need to work and then these things happen. So yeah, I was involved in that. I was, involved in the investigation and became like a pretty serious matter with the police and everything. And again, that's like the highest reach you can. And it's also, I think in a lot of companies, when you think about the bad guys being on the outside, and it's almost like, being betrayed by your own family. I remember the CEO of NSO, very charismatic guy, like, one in a million guy. And he was like, that's what hurts me the most. That like this guy, okay, he hates me and he hates the company and he's leaving. But why would you get like, hundreds of people you work with every day to lose their livelihood and to lose the ability to feed their families because of your anger? But again, that's a problem with acting emotionally. Also, there's a lot of phases to these kind of insider risks. First they think they can't get away with it, and then they realize that actually they can, and then they're like, suddenly they feel very powerful, and then usually they kind of freaks them out, like, oh my god, I can't believe I got away with this, and then they think what to do, and then they end up doing something stupid like trying to sell it or whatever. You know what I mean? And that's a lot of times where things go bad. But it taught me a lot of things because I knew there was a chance this would happen. Obviously, we knew the risks, and it's something we brought up. And I learned a lot of lessons about it. Again, we talk about the Department of No and me saying like, oh, if you feel that way, don't victimize yourself, empower yourself. Because I was kind of victimizing myself when that happened. I was like, oh my God, like, there's risks here and, bad things could happen. Nobody's listening to me. And then, no. And then it happened and I felt even worse. And then like, when I look back at them, that's how I make regrets. Like, why wasn't I better? You know what I mean? That's the only thing I can control, my actions. Why didn't I, fight more, do more, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Ultimately, like I wasn't to blame, obviously. In fact, like the company, gave me kudos and I was part of the recovery and everything. But I think if you want to improve, which is where the state you should live in, constant improvement, every program should always strive for constant improvement. Every person should strive for constant improvement. Look at your past, look at a mistake and say like, what can I learn from that? Why can't I do next time? That was one of the drivers of going to a place like Rapyd. When I started Rapyd, I was like, this place is so boring. We were 50 people and we weren't hacking anybody. And, it's just like the payments go. Payments is a boring thing. If you think about it, like payments is only interesting when it doesn't work. Just imagine payments becomes like the most interesting thing that happened to you. And the story would be like this. I went to Walmart. It was COVID. I needed toilet paper and the damn point of sale device didn't work. And that ruined my life. That really ruined my week. Because then I couldn't do this. And then my wife, and it's always, that's the only time payments when it doesn't work. You know what I mean? And it's always interesting when it does work. And even when it doesn't work, it's interesting, right?
So I'm curious. I want to hear about the transition over to Rapyd and kind of what inspired you to, take that leap from being part of a larger organization and jumping over to a smaller startup. But I'm also really curious when, like, for example, with the theft that we were just talking about, did you find that ended up occupying a lot of your time afterwards in terms of, engaging with law enforcement and
totally all my time. it was just around the holiday season, and there was no holiday. Constantly, just a forensic activity, understanding what happened, understanding how. I kind of knew how because I knew where we were weak. I raised a flag there, you know what I mean? But it not just in a general sense, but exactly forensically, how did he manage? And then doing all the actions that need to be done afterwards to make sure you can minimize those risks. And then taking, and then the conclusions, personal conclusions about my actions, career conclusions about what's another company. So I ended up staying a long time, not a long time, but I think about a year afterwards. But I already had on my radar, like, the best thing for me is to find a place that, I could be very influential so I can, to the best of my ability, make sure this doesn't happen again. And by the way, I still keep that mindset. If something happens in Rapyd, I always think like, okay, how could I have stopped this? Like it has nothing to do with me, and thank God we haven't had an event, like a big cyber event or anything like that, but even some operational event, which happens at every company all the time. And I think you said you're the CEO, of Asano, right? So it's such a lonely position because it's like, he'll decide. It's his problem. You know what I mean? It's kind of not fair. If you're an executive, why is it the CEO's problem? You know, why don't you collaborate? Why aren't you like a better like partner there? Like maybe it should be your problem, even though it's not your responsibility. Maybe you can find a way to work with the other C level or V level or whatever director and be like, hey, I'm worried about that. Most senior people, unless they're terrible, if you tell them like, I'm really worried about X, they're going to give you the time of day. They're going to talk to you. They're going to think with you. But we're all swapped. We don't do that. And then it all comes to the CEO and he doesn't have the luxury of saying like, oh, I don't care about that because you care about everything. You're the CEO. So I think, again, that's a lesson I tried to have for myself. Yeah, it took all the time. It took all the time when it happened.
So post-breach sounds like a difficult time for you personally and professionally to just grapple with and reflect back on all those things. One thing you've been talking about that I think is really interesting is building that collaboration with peers. Do you have any tips for the audience who, they're risk professionals or they're privacy professionals and they're struggling to go build those relationships and build those bridges? Do you have anything that's worked for you that you would recommend other folks do?
Yeah, so obviously humor. It's funny. I still remember this. One of my first jobs, like in Israel, you do high school and then army, military service. And one of my first job was like a telemarketing, it was at night because, we have opposite hours with most of the US. So we would, I have like by the way, I have a bit of an accent. People thought I was Hispanic in the telemarketing. It was weird. Like everybody thought I was Hispanic. Apparently on the phone, I sounded Hispanic. I was honored. It was like the coolest I've ever felt. And I sucked, by the way. I was just horrible. I didn't have patience. I didn't know how to sell. I didn't understand anything. So we'd have to sell. And you were supposed to get 4 sales a night or they'd fire you after a week. Well, that was hard work. So you have to work all night, just make like hundreds of calls. Everybody would like curse you at that. Like everybody's like, yeah, screw you and hang up in your face. And then somehow, just by sheer numbers, you need to get like 4 sales a night. Some people will get 8 and 10 and then they get bonuses, but 4 was the number you'd have to stay. And I was bad. I was getting like, 1 a night, 2 a night. Like I had a great night. I got like 3, and I never ever get to 4. And like a month passed and I was like, okay, I'm getting fired at the end of the month. And then another month passed. I was there already for a few months and finally got fired. My boss called me. He's like, listen here, the rule, you have to go. I'm like, but I'm like deer in the forest. Like every time I come, like, is it happening today? Is he toying with me? And I was like frustrated because I wasn't good, but I was staying. You know what I mean? Because you're supposed to get kicked out. It's like what I was like mailing it in, and then I was like, why'd you keep me for so long? He's like, you're funny. He said, when you work in telemarketing, like it's hard, it's grueling, and like you're on the phones. And there's so much negative energy thrown at you from. And by the way, I know today, for a few years, it kept people would call me and have a lot of empathy. I'm like, oh, it's such a hard job. I'm really sorry. I'm not interested. Today I'm like, how dare you call me? You're the worst. How dare you? so, and I get it. It's like you take all, wherever you are, the most negative stuff, you just throw it down the phone at the person calling. So he said, like, put your positivity. Like, obviously, I can't lose too much money on you, but it was worth the extra weeks, months that you're around. And I took that lesson with me. I think, like, ultimately, you work with somebody, you spend hours with them every day. If it's fun to work with you, even if you give bad news, if it's fun to work with you, if you just make a good atmosphere, if you come and smile, if you just bring in positivity, people will enjoy working with you. And that's very important. You know what I mean? And we all have these people in the office and we're like, I don't even know what that guy does. He puts a smile on my face or she puts a smile on my face when she comes in because she just got that positive energy. So I try to do that. Obviously, being an executive, managing, dozens and dozens of people globally, I'm like very frustrated a lot because I have some vision and it's not executed and it's like a few levels of not executed. And I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Then you're like, why is this not happening? And then you have like this kind of, resting bitch face. I would call it mad face, whatever you want to call it. Like always like that. But, I try to channel that again, try to remind myself. And when it happens, especially when I collaborate, nobody knows the dark secret my team knows. But when I collaborate and come and I make that connection through humor, which is my tool, but also from really, really focusing and trying to see what the other side is going through. That's it. That's all you need to do.
So empathy and humor.
Empathy and humor. Pitching is overrated. Nobody cares about your 10-page argument. Nobody's going to read that. At best, they're going to put in ChatGPT and tell them, even though if they don't have a license, they're still going to do it. And they're going to take a screenshot and upload it because you can't lock it. They're going to take a picture of the phone and just upload it like that. ChatGPT can eat that and understand that today. You don't even need OCR or whatever. They're going to do that, and then they're going to summarize your long ass pitch about why it's important and why you're right and why they're wrong. And they're going to get a line out of it, and they're not going to listen to you, and it just gets harder and harder. So the way to do that is just not to play that game. Just don't play that game. Come to them with understanding and curiosity for what they're going for. Listen to them. Understand their problems, and then, especially if you don't have organizational power, because one of the great things about working in a finance company, which is again, if you don't want to do that, then work in finance. Finance, they care about compliance, they care about security. It's very, very, it's people or medicine, I think, less experienced there.
So where did your humor come from, Nir? I mean, were you always a funny guy? Were you born and everybody was like, oh, look at that funny baby?
For sure they said that. They said I'm so sorry. They probably told somebody. There's a few things. First off, I was in a school trip and I got bitten by radioactive. No, just kidding. But first, I think, growing up in Israel, in the Middle East, everybody knows what's happening here. You have to have some humor. You have to have some humor. Or you don't have to, but it's much easier if you do. When you're in the bomb shelter, or when you read all the horrible things, or when you see all the hate, or when if you have a little bit of humor, it diffuses the negativity, and it's easier to have discussions, and it's easier to live. So I think, just from the fact of the reality I'm in Israel, but also really in the world, it's tough times for many people. I think humor is something that if you develop, it's good. I think it also comes from your family. I came from a pretty big family. Lots of siblings, if you're the funny one, that's a thing. It's true. If you have 4 or 5 siblings, you got to have
battling for attention.
Yeah. So people don't forget you in the car, right? It's like, where's the soda guy? I'm thirsty. Oh, we forgot it. So exactly. You're battling for attention. You're battling, you get it. Then I think you connect that to, it's just, today it's just such a great time for anything. When I was coming up and, starts privacy, in NSO, or even really before that, we're just starting the drafts and you're like, where can I understand what's privacy? Where can I talk to somebody who understands that? You can go to a podcast. I remember when I found out about cybersecurity podcasts. I'm like, wait, you're telling me that the CISO of Google is talking about what he does for an hour for free and I can just listen for free? And every week there's another, and I can just listen and rip them off and say it's my idea and get all the credit. You know what I mean? So that alone, the fact that this exists, I assume sometimes you have people who actually give professional value. And then you're like, wow, I should really do that in my program. Here's 3 things. Maybe I can say that at the end. So, stick around, guys, and we'll talk about things you can do to be better at your job. So yeah, same for comedy. Go on Netflix, go on YouTube. You'll get the best comedians just doing hours and hours of stand-up. You listen to that.
You have to pick your comedians, though, because if you pick the wrong comedian, you might really be saying some bad stuff.
Oh, man, I've picked the wrong comedians. I've made the bad jokes. I've apologized. It's happened. I've had people in my office saying, are you sure your office isn't bugged? Because if it is, you're done for. I'm like, if my office was bugged, I'd be done for 6 years ago. So my office is not bugged. Or somebody's like how much dirt do you need? Like really, like how much? So I definitely picked the wrong comedians, but it doesn't matter. The point is that, humor and like delivery, just like anything, it's really something that you just, it's a skill you practice, it's perishable. You practice enough, you can get it. Anybody can have more humor. You just need to listen to people who deliver correctly, talk like them, and then you'll get it. Same thing. Anybody could be a better, yeah, a lot of times people ask, how can I get into cyber? I'm like, okay, this is what you do. Here's 3 podcasts. Listen to 50 episodes of each, get back to me. Most of them never get back to me. The people who did are all security executives now. Not
Wow.
many, like a handful of people. That's all they, obviously they did more stuff, but after you listen to 150 episodes, let's say they're half-hour episodes, you just listen to 75 hours of the highest level people talking about their craft, you have a clue. You understand the concepts. They talk about what they do. You take that, you start learning more, you start applying that to your job, you start getting a little bit of resume. Then you go to an interview, you have value. They'll ask you, oh, what would you do for a program? You're like, you just listen to the CISO of Uber explain what they do. You're like, I would do what Uber does. I would do like these 6 things. You're like, oh my God, you know what Uber does? That's value right there. You pass the interview. Especially today, if I interview somebody and they don't have the experience I want, but they can do what I need, that's an interesting candidate. That's definitely somebody I would want to talk more and explore. And I've hired people and good people. Some of my best people are people who didn't have the experience, but had the attitude. And I knew they could do what I need. And that was right. Sometimes I was wrong, but usually let's focus on the when I was right. So most of the times I was right and it paid off. So that's my biggest advice to, job seekers who want to break into privacy, security or whatever. Find these kind of podcasts, even this one, listen to it. Take notes, understand the concepts, understand what companies value, and make yourself somebody who can get accepted for the job, who can deliver on it, who can make the promises, and you'll see your career just skyrocket.
I think that's brilliant advice, Nir. I mean, and as an executive of a company myself, I can tell you that you can teach the skills, you can teach the craft, but you cannot teach somebody to be curious and inspired.
Or funny. He
Or
has to
funny.
want it and work at it and work on it. Listen to tons of stand up and make the joke. And remember when we were young, we'd like meet friends like, did you see this episode? Did you saw SNL tonight? Oh my God. And then you reenact the funny things and then you make your friends laugh by just reenacting what happened. And that's how it starts. So, you're not going to, most people don't do open mics or whatever, but you can still listen to stand up and laugh to yourself and kind of remember like a zinger and then use it later on. And then, after a while, you got a repertoire. So you got that.
That is awesome. And so, I'd love to shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about some of the more tactical stuff that you do in terms of thinking about the intersection of privacy and security, because those two realms used to be very separate. I mean, privacy and security were kind of independent on their Venn diagram, but over the last 5 years, we've seen them begin overlapping. And I'm curious, when you think about building security programs, is privacy a part of that thought process and planning process, or do you do those two things independently?
Both. It's not either, it's both, right? So first off, if you want to excel in privacy, you got to do it independently. You got to bring in, it's a skill set. It's important. It's much more compliance oriented than a lot of cyber. But at the same time, any cyber program, one of the things you got to take into account is compliance considerations regarding the data, because again, that's the context you need. I have all this data, but I'm in an unregulated island in the Pacific. Okay, cool. I don't need to do anything about it. I don't have to be compliance ready. I don't have to tomorrow morning prove I'm fine. But, if you work in a global payments company like I do, we have to assume that tomorrow morning a regulator is going to ask some questions. And we want to be ready with the answers. So you have to be ready. You know what I mean? You have to be ready. Doesn't mean you have to get everything right. A lot of people are like, oh my God, I have this gap. Okay, great. We'll have something to aspire to later on. You can't fix anything. That's all. Again, that's even naive. If you want to fix every gap, you're naive. You're naive. You can't fix it. You want the gaps. It's like you want cyber to be around. You don't want to get hacked. You don't want the gaps to materialize. So you choose your battles.
When you think about security, right? One of the tenets of security is, log, right? Keep it all, because that's where you're going to find the fingerprints and the footprints for somebody who's trying to attack you. Has privacy made it more difficult to implement some of those security protocols? Because we talk about data minimization, which is very much the opposite of what security
Ye-
professionals historically want to
Yeah,
do.
but it's only if you're a dummy. You know what I mean? It's like I can't have this seatbelt. It's choking me. No, you're just not sitting straight. It's like seatbelts are designed. So yeah, logs, you should have at least a year of logs, if not more, depends what your context is. But it doesn't mean it has to have PII. Like there's zero forensic, unless just like police. But I'm talking like for a regular company that just wants to know who hacked it. It's not like, oh wait, we don't know the Bob's last name, and we don't have this PII in the log. We can't investigate. No, it's not important. When you investigate cyber, you want to investigate, the who, how, what. So Bob is only important if he's the hacker. You know what I mean? If he's not the hacker, if he's just a data subject that kind of use your service, it doesn't matter. Your logs could just totally be, obfuscated and encrypted, and you just remove that. You know what I mean? So in fact, it hinders you to have that. In fact, logs should be as small as possible. So I would argue that if you want to have a good monitoring program, don't take all the logs, whatever you need. Think about how you can get hacked, especially today in the world of scale. When you do payments globally, you're talking about millions and billions of payments. If I take all that information over to security, I'm just going to pay millions just to ingest that, to compute that. It's just so hard. I would rather minimize that to exactly what I need to solve the riddle that's happening. And again, it's not like, oh my God, what could happen? It's like, what could happen. It happens all the time. Just that's what happens. You know exactly how. There's like 5 ways to get in. They can get in like this, and then you'll need to know these things. So log that. So what we did is we worked really hard, and with our SIM vendor, and we wrote custom loggers for our applications. Meaning, because we don't even want all the logs. We don't even want, forget about PII, not PII. Obviously, additionally, because we're PCI compliant, it's very important. We want to make sure that all the PCI information, and we expand that to PII, doesn't go to where it shouldn't go. So, for analytics and, AI and all this data stuff, nobody needs to know the personal information, right? So we partner with some tools that allow this compliant access. There's all kinds of cool technology. People should look into something like differential privacy, where it kind of, for every correct value, it puts in like, a lot of incorrect value to the point that statistically it's the same, but you can't know which one it's real. So my name would appear like 16 times. It's like, it's impossible to trace back to the real person. And it works really well with data privacy and data streamers and a lot of other stuff. So anyway, there's a lot of cool solutions we do. But the point is, for logging and monitoring, we minimize it. We went even less. And then now, it's cheaper, it's faster, and we get the answers we need when we need it. And when the forensics people come in, it will be ultra focused on how they need to respond. And we know, because obviously we work with the forensics as well. We know if an event, like God forbid we ever have an incident, we'll be able to respond right away with exactly what we need. And that way it works perfectly. It's compliant for privacy. So I'm just saying, just like anything, quality. You know what I mean? It's like, how can I have like, a chocolate dessert that doesn't have an aftertaste? Sounds like you just didn't go to a good restaurant. How can I have a good Reuben sandwich that doesn't have that crunchy or whatever? Afterwards it has that, the pastrami's and the mustard isn't spicy enough. You didn't go to the right Reuben restaurant place, right? You need to go to the right place. So, the answer is quality. It's quality. Don't victimize yourself. They'll be like, it's so hard to do it. Yeah, usually, because if you do it bad, it's hard to do it.
I love that, though. I mean, you raise a really good point. There's a lot of discussion about data minimization. And often you find that privacy teams are having to argue with other teams at the organization about data minimization. And, like, it saves you money. That's a pretty compelling argument. Ingesting those billions of lines of logs costs a lot.
Yeah. And again, if there's, for instance, because we're in finance, there's a lot of anti-money laundering compliance and a lot of other reasons to keep data, and even to keep it for 5 or 7 years, right? And that usually trumps privacy. Again, we're talking about NSO, right? A lot of times when the government wants to catch the bad guys who do fraud, they don't care about privacy. They're like, just give it to me now. Give me a dump of your data. And I'm just going to keep it wherever I want. And if you ask me questions, I'll arrest you. By the way, this is all governments in the West, in the EU. If they want to, they're investigating criminals who are, moving money. They'll do anything. They're ruthless. So sometimes we have to keep it. But again, also what do we have to keep and how long and how do we know to erase it? That's where really a lot of times you can excel because it's hard to be good at everything. A lot of privacy professionals, they know the privacy regulations really well. They know what flies. They're amazing. But what they don't understand is how the product is technically built. But as cyber professionals, we understand that a lot better many times, not always, because we actually put safeguards in place and we have to run a pen test and we get results. So this collaboration is really great. We're like their CTO, so to speak. So a lot of times I'll go with the privacy team or somebody from my team will go to meetings and we sit with the architects and R&D and we're like, remember when you put that feature in for that cyber issue? So let's do that and get the data. Or remember, we want to add that encryption because of the customer wanted this kind of key. So let's do that, but make it, use an encryption trick to kind of, kill the data that you can't get it. We kind of brainstorm together and we collaborate. And by the way, it works well. If your legal team likes you, it's always good, right? It's always good. Like there's always a contract that you need them to, you need them to work on really fast when they have a lot of more important things to do. I got to sign this vendor now or the spring sale is off or whatever. So it's really good to collaborate. And I think it's very important. I think it's very important if you want to have high quality. When you go to like a chef restaurant, I assume the kitchen, nobody's like, I don't care that tomatoes suck because I'm doing potatoes or I'm doing soups. No, you want the kitchen to be good. You want the quality to be high. So I think that's a good attitude to have when you collaborate.
I love that. Keep the quality high. So speaking of quality, what's next for Rapyd? You guys are a fast growing payments platform. There's a big 800-pound gorilla in that category in the form of Stripe. What is it that Rapyd does that you feel is something that stands out, that's different, that gives you guys an edge in the space?
Yeah. So globally, we're very strong. So yes, Stripe is a gorilla. By the way, Stripe is one of Rapyd's investors because Stripe, they're so big, they tried to look at the up and coming companies and bet on them early, which they did very well with Rapyd. And I actually got to meet Patrick Collison once when he came to visit Rapyd. And it was a real honor to meet him. Again, I came from NSO, so I was like, I'd like a novelty hire. And I was like, so wait, you're like the biggest fintech, really? But yeah, Stripe are amazing. These kind of category leaders, what they do is they raise the whole category. So thanks to the easiness of Stripe, there's a whole generation of businesses that expect really easy payments in many payment methods all over the world. And that's a giant opportunity for a lot of companies, Rapyd included. So the payments field is just growing and growing. And it seems like there's enough room for everybody. So again, it's not a lot of companies also, they have Stripe, but they also have a Rapyd or another company because, you have to be redundant in payments. And that's great. So I think what I see is, Rapyd is killing it. We also do a lot of M&As. We buy like almost a company a year, every 2 years. So we just bought a company our size. I'm integrating it. You're asking me what's next. It's almost like, I feel like I'm at the treadmill sprinting and you're like, so what's your next sprint? I'm like, let me get this one through. You know what I mean? It's like, it's really like just before you and after you have calls with like Columbia to integrate them. And I don't know what's next. I'm still, if you want to live in the present, set yourself on fire. You'll be like so present, you know what I mean? So a lot of times in our profession, cyber or privacy, there's just a giant flaming fire to put out.
Yeah. And you're at a startup. I mean, so on top of that, right? Everything's going 1,000 miles an hour.
And if it's not, and I got that mentality. So if it's not, because I'm one of the early ones. So if it's not, I'm like, what's going on here? Why is there a process? We should just go, So, which is, again, I have to like calm down here. Don't let them see the real you. Make a joke.
Be empathetic. Be funny.
Be empathetic. What did you see in that podcast? Do that.
So this has been an amazing interview, and I know that I have really enjoyed listening to you. But you're a professional in security and risk, and I'm curious. When you go home at night or when you start your day, is there anything that you do that you wouldn't necessarily recommend that everybody else do in terms of privacy and security?
In terms of privacy and security, there's so many things I would not recommend people to do. But in terms of privacy and security, wow. That's a really interesting question. I would say that social media is horrible. Doom scrolling. There's so many hours of nights that I was like, I finished the work and I just want to I should get into bed, and sleep is so important. And then I'm like, 40 minutes later, an hour, I'm like, what did I just do? I have so many emails I didn't get to. Did I just watch like 1,000 reels? You know what I mean? So that thing, I always regret it. I always feel so weak. You know what I mean? It's like I succumbed to the drug, the dopamine, the dopamine. You feel like you just feel your IQ like really like going down. It's like I tell you, you forget to breathe, you forget to like take breaths, and then you're like, okay, I gotta stop this. It's just the worst. It really is the worst, especially if you love what you do. And I really love cyber nowadays, and there's always another startup to help, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's one thing. Another tip I can give is, if somebody gets scammed, your wife, your mom, your kids, and then you're like, it's like almost, there's a saying in Hebrew, probably in English too, the shoemaker walks barefoot, right? It's more eloquently than I say it. So you're like, damn it. Like they just scammed my mom. Like, why didn't I not have the patience to like kind of explain? So I actually went to my son's school, third grade, gave him like, a lesson like in like, online safety. It was freaking unbearable. They didn't respect me at all. I'm like, but guys, don't you know I'm an executive? And they're like, shut up. No, but no, they're really cute kids. It's like, by the way, today's kids, technology is like their favorite subject. They were glistening. I never remember, but I remember just being bored out of my mind in school. And they're like, oh my God, they're all raising their hands. Please, let me tell you about the time that somebody hacked my uncle. And, they're like living it, and they have no idea. And the parents have no idea. They don't, at least around me, like I talk to parents, like, do you put like any limits? Do you put like any apps? Are you monitoring your kids' activity? Are you letting them, watch shorts? Like, it's a drug for us. Do you let like a little kid do that? And people are like, oh, we shouldn't we? I feel a lot of parents don't have that. So when that happens around me, I'm like, I know better. This is so important in modern life. I should know better. I should act better. They say like, nobody's going to remember you worked hard except your kids, right? So there's a lot of times it's your kids, your family. When you have this ability to teach and you do that, and you get, you're the go-to guy in the company. And yet somebody hacked my dad's Facebook, right? I'm like, did you have MFA? He's like, what's MFA? I'm like, I failed you as a son. I'm so sorry. You know what I mean?
Well, Nir, this has been amazing. And for everybody listening, please head over to Rapyd and take a look at their global payments processing platform.
Rapyd with a Y, by the way.
Rapyd.net is their website.
Yeah,
so head over, invested in by Stripe, competing with Stripe. That dynamic sounds complicated, but I can't wait to watch it play out. Nir, thank you for joining today. It's been a real pleasure.
I just got to say that we're not competing with Stripe, because Stripe is mainly US and we're not. So, there's nothing to watch. It's like a different territory. But yeah, I love watching Stripe. They're doing it right. And I invite anybody listening to connect with me on LinkedIn. If you have any crazy startups ideas, Israel is like the great global startup hub. I help a lot of startups. I help a lot of founders. If you're a founder and, you want some advice, you need some help, I'm busy, but, you can reach out. I always love to, help startups when I can. And yeah, that's it.
It's very generous of you. Nir, thanks so much for joining us. This has been a pleasure, and you are definitely the funniest CISO that I have ever met. Leading with empathy and humor is a real treat for us to learn about. And if you'd like to learn more about Nir, you can find him on LinkedIn, or you can go visit his company's website at rapyd.net. That's rapyd.net, where they do global payments. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Privacy Insider Podcast. You can find a full transcript of this episode and any show notes at osano.com. That's www.osano.com. And while you're there, get access to an excerpt of my book, The Privacy Insider: How to Embrace Data Privacy and Join the Next Wave of Trusted Brands, which is now available on Amazon for purchase. Until next month, take care. And remember, data privacy is a fundamental human right, y'all.